evening, folks, and thank you for coming. At this time, I'd like to call the February 5th, 2013 Planning Board meeting to order. We're meeting in this room tonight because the Historic District Commission, is it? Or the Historical Commission?
The Districts Commission?
Historic District Commission has several hearings tonight, and they needed the bigger room. The first item on our agenda are minutes from January 22nd. Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, I haven't finished the review of them, so there's nothing to report tonight.
Okay. So would you mind?
Table them till next meeting?
Okay, that's a motion. Second?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained. The motion carries. The next item on the agenda is approval not required. I don't believe
There are none.
There are none. Okay. The next item on the agenda is public hearing for the zoning articles for the annual 2013 Springtown meeting. No testimony will be taken tonight. The hearing has been rescheduled for February 19th. There was an error in the procedural error that caused us to have to delay this for 2 weeks for notification of the public. So we apologize for that, and it does happen occasionally, but so if you are here for a public hearing for any of the zoning articles coming up in the annual Springtown meeting, we apologize to you and tell you that in 2 weeks we will be holding a public hearing. So at this time, I really didn't open it for a public hearing.
Right, well, procedurally, you should probably open it and then close it, but I think we'll...
Okay, all right. Well, I'll open the hearing now and reiterate that because of a notification snafu, we have to republish the hearings and held them in February 19th. So at this time, I'm going to close this hearing. And if any of you are here for any of that, you certainly feel you're free to leave at this time and accept our apologies. The next item on the agenda is discussions, sober house update. Paul asked me about that last week, and so we put it on the agenda for this evening. I had already done some research on this. Just as a review, a citizen brought a petition article to town meeting about 16 months ago in the fall of 2011, and it was a petition article to have some rules and regulations put in place governing sober houses. And so the planning board had a hearing on it and voted for indefinite postponement because we had some issues about enforcement, etc., on the article. So since then, the planning board has done some things in conjunction with the Human Services Department, and so tonight Karen Cadera is here to just review that with us. And I had spoken to both her and Mr. Curry about some follow-up after the hearings that we held, and so I don't want to let this issue just die and go away and end up on somebody's shelf. I think we owe it to the public to follow through a little bit more and possibly help the citizens that have concerns about sober houses, and also possibly help the residents of the sober houses. So this time, I would like to ask Karen to please just touch base with us briefly about what has transpired since that town meeting, and then I will ask the planning board for permission to continue working on this issue with Karen and Mr. Curry, probably the building inspector, commissioner, building inspector, and maybe David Vieira, who was kind enough to moderate the hearings that we had. So Karen, if you'd be kind enough to just give us a brief review of what we did up to this point,
Sure.
I'd appreciate it.
Sure. As you mentioned, Ralph, I think the petitioner's article was in November of 2011. Shortly thereafter, I think maybe late January, early February, David Vieira, as our legislator, and the Human Services Department hosted a community meeting, and we invited the owners of all the sober houses in Falmouth, the managers, and any neighbors and the public who wanted to come. We had probably, I don't know, maybe 50 people there or so. We also had some of the town representatives there. The town planner was there, and the building commissioner was there, and the police department were there as well. In that first meeting, we focused primarily on hearing what the concerns were of the neighbors and the residents. And we cataloged those concerns in order to see how we wanted to proceed from there. And that took an entire meeting. And then we had a second meeting, which was probably, I'm not sure of the dates, I didn't write them down to bring them with me, but it was either April or early May. We had a second community forum, again inviting all the same people to come together, and the purpose of that meeting was to facilitate a very personal discussion by neighborhood between the individual owners and managers of a particular sober house and the neighbors of that neighborhood. And so we broke them out by neighborhood, and then had someone facilitating each one of those discussions, an external person facilitating each one of those discussions. Everyone's, at the end of that discussion, felt that that exercise was very useful, that it really created some personal relationships between the neighbors and the owners and the managers, and there was commitment from all sides to continue that discussion and try and work out their concerns on a neighborhood level. And so that was the end of that process. Shortly thereafter, we also knew at that process that the Department of Public Health, the Mass Department of Public Health was in the process of doing a study on sober houses statewide to find out how many there were and what the state of them was, and also to do research nationally on regulation of sober houses. So they were in the process of doing that study. They, since in May of 2012, have come up with the report of that study. I believe you have an executive summary in your packets that Ryan provided. And basically their outcome was that because of the fair housing laws and a number of housing laws statewide as well, it is not within their purview to regulate sober houses. And so what they suggested is that they could offer voluntary training to the managers of sober houses. And they recommended that the legislature put in some incentives to encourage the managers and the owners to partake of that voluntary training. That was in May of 2012. To my knowledge, there hasn't been any movement on that. or it hasn't been implemented. I can't say there hasn't been any movement, but it hasn't been implemented that I'm aware of. So I think that they're waiting for the legislature to put in some incentives because they didn't anticipate that they would get much response without the incentive program accompanying it. So, my understanding, we check in pretty regularly with neighbors, with the owners, the managers, with Gosnold. People in AA keep us informed about how the sober houses are doing. My understanding is that the issues in question with one particular sober house and that neighborhood have been resolved, and that the communication between neighbors and owners continues to be able to handle the problems that they were experiencing. There doesn't seem to be any other major glaring problem sticking out at the moment. So as far my understanding is that the town doesn't plan any further action at this point. I can let you know that the Human Services Department continues to offer free counseling and free case management services to residents in sober houses as a way of helping them in their recovery if they can't afford counseling, and also to hook them up with community resources. So we continue to do that.
Okay, well, thank you, Karen, for that review. I read the transcripts from that town meeting, and it was quite informative to me because there was a lot of testimony from town meeting members and other people. And then I also read the study that was done by the state. And I felt as though there were still a few things that we might consider. This was brought to the planning board, as an article for the planning board to consider, and we recommended indefinite postponement, and it was voted that way. But I still felt as though there were a couple of possibilities of things that we might do, and I'm not going to go into those with you tonight, but you do have the copy of the cover letter from the commissioner of Mr. Auerbach, and of the Bureau of Substance Abuse Services. And then there's also something included there about frequently asked questions about sober houses. So those are for you to take home. But what I would like for this board is to agree that I continue to work with Karen Federa and Brian, and possibly the town, the building inspector, to see whether or not there's any final further steps that we might take to wrap up this issue in the town. So if there's any questions by the board members of either Ms. Cadera or myself, then I think now would be a good time to ask them. Yeah, Paul?
Have there been any major issues and concerns recently? Because it seems to have died down, the whole controversy.
Since the facilitation between neighbors and owners of each neighborhood happened, there hasn't been any that I'm aware of. I think when they have an issue, and it's not that I haven't heard of issues, but I've heard that they go right to the owner. You know, they were out talking on the deck and they were smoking and swearing, and the owner goes in and tells them, you know, you have to stop that.
Okay,
And so what's happening is that it's being handled by the neighborhood.
Okay, so they have an avenue to pursue.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
How many sober houses are there?
I'm not really sure, since they're not licensed, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 10, 11, 12, somewhere like that. It
So you're talking
fluctuates.
100 people in these homes or more?
Total? There's probably 8, yeah, maybe 100, yeah.
And the problems have been dissipated since that series of meetings? What
And
happened
there's
to
been
those
change
other
in
problems?
management, there's,
Sorry?
the change in management is fairly common in this particular industry. So with the change in management, things change, the climate changes in any particular sober house, the one that, you know, is kind of talked about in the AA community as being the best. This month, you know, 6 months from now, it's a different one, that kind of thing, so,
You can find there's a process that they go through, there is a flare-up of some sort?
well, I think there's a change in how things are managed. And some management styles are better than others. Clearly, I think that that's the case. But the difficulty is in regulating and mandating that particular management style is something that we've been told, not only by our own town council, but by the state and by the federal fair housing laws say that you can't do that. You can't tell them how they can manage their housing.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If someone has a complaint, how do they know who to talk to?
They now know who the owner of the building is, and they call the owner directly. And
How do you
the
know?
owners gave out their phone numbers and their cell phones and all of that to the neighbors.
Well, I'm a neighbor of one and no one's given it to me. So how would I know who to contact in the sober house near me?
Maybe look up the owner on the town's
So I find the
website,
property owner
property owner.
and address it through the property owner. So that's the proper channel of communication. Look it up in the town records and address it with the property owner.
Or you could go, just knock on the door and say, I want to talk to the manager. But the owner is the one who's running the business. That's the owner of the property,
So you can address the letter to the property owner.
absolutely.
Yes, Beth?
Well, although I have no problem with you continuing this in any manner that you'd like to progress on it, Ralph, what I'm hearing tonight is that we seem not to have, since the meeting, a continuing problem, and that we are constrained in doing anything further, in progressing to regulate. So
That's right.
I'm not sure that there's any utility in carrying this further.
Okay,
At this point.
Just let me explain my position on that then. I understand that we cannot regulate them, but the state report indicated that the owners and operators of sober houses are not willing to even participate in a best practices type of thing, or sharing examples, et cetera, unless there's an incentive. And Karen alluded to that. And I wanted to see whether or not there were some incentives that we could offer the owners of these sober houses to get them to possibly form an organization within the town, or the state has an organization. It's called, help me out, Karen. It's called
Mass
the,
Association of Sober Houses?
Yeah, Mass-
It's not a state agency, it's just a
it's just a right. And
nonprofit
right. It's
group.
It's a Massachusetts Association of Sober Houses, and they have a code of ethics. And I'm not convinced that it could be possible, but I'm not convinced that every sober house owner in this town is aware of that organization, or if they are, what their code of ethics is. And it might help them, and it also might help their clients, the residents in these, and I shouldn't say clients because they're residents. Just as a reminder, sober houses do not offer any, counseling at all. They're not allowed to. And, 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 because they're not licensed to do that. But what Karen's organization does, the town, the human services organization in our town, in a conversation I had with you, Karen, prior, you said that you used to offer that service to people, and I'm just wondering are you still offering that to them, and are they aware that it's available?
Well, the awareness piece, I don't know. I mean, we haven't changed our offering of it, certainly.
Right.
But when the management changes as often as it does, we often don't find out about a change in management for 4 months.
Right.
And so, whether the new management is aware, I don't know.
Right. I have some suggestions on that, but anyway, are there any other questions or suggestions from the planning board?
I have a question,
Yes.
Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, I didn't get in on the beginning of this. I don't know. To what extent, I understand what you're saying, you cannot provide any kind of specific regulation. To what extent are general regulatory standards such as public nuisance standards applicable?
Everything applies as it applies to any other residence in town.
So that if it were to rise to, like you mentioned, to people being loud and disturbing, causing
Absolutely.
disturbance on the back porch, and those people went in when a complaint was received, but if that was something that was happening repeatedly, then perhaps a general, a bylaw or a general rule could be applied to them.
Absolutely.
But beyond that, you can't specifically regulate.
These issues between the abutters or the neighbors and the sober houses are generally complaint-driven, and as the representative from the Falmouth Police Department said at our hearing, at the hearing, the first hearing we had, that people need to, log their complaint through the police. I mean, you have that as an option.
Yes.
You can
And they
go
will take
directly to
action.
the owner and say, please, take, or the manager, and say that this is okay. So anyway, I'm not looking for a big discussion on this tonight. I just want to know whether or not you would agree that I continue working with Karen on this, probably for another month or so, and then we can put it to bed, so to speak. I just didn't want it to go away because there were no current issues, because there's nothing to say that there might be future issues. So I think my feeling is that the planning board can feel comfortable if we follow up on this, and not just put it on the shelf somewhere and just say, wash our hands of it. Yes, Rick?
Chair, I agree with Pat, maybe I'm going beyond what she feels. I think this is a matter solely that has to be dealt with by the neighbors, that they should be documenting what's going on. The fact that there may be some industry standards that aren't being complied with would certainly be relevant in the context of any private action that might be brought on account of nuisance. That would certainly be relevant to show that they are they're not complying with their own industry standards. But if we don't have a basis under the law to promulgate regulations and bylaws that regulate them, then there's nothing much that we can do as the planning board.
Well, I have to disagree, Rich, that I believe that we could encourage them to participate in some of these things, especially if they're not aware of them. If they're aware of them, fine. But I'm not convinced that they are.
Ralph, I just make one more comment. You have a much kinder view of human nature than I do. I'm a lawyer. I sue people. I know, as a matter of fact, especially when it comes to making money, people never do things voluntarily that they don't have to do. The stick always works. The carrot rarely does. And
Can I also add a couple of more pieces of information that are actually happened before the 2011 town meeting? And that is that in 2007, the town attempted to put some restrictions on one of the sober houses in Falmouth and was sued, and they reached a settlement. where the agreement was that the town would not do this again. And then in 2010, I believe, the building department attempted to do a voluntary registration. No restrictions, no regulations attached to it, just a voluntary, let us know that you exist registration. And the town council told them to stop, because it would violate the previous 2007 agreement with HUD. So that was stopped. So those happened before the 2011 town meeting. So this-
Yeah, Jim?
Well, I just have a question. I've heard that the town is not gonna be, now gonna be certifying and inspecting anyone who rents their house out in the summertime. And if they don't register for the inspection, the fee's $30, and if they don't register, it's a fine of $300. These sober houses gonna be under that same rule, or do they get exemption from that as well?
Good question.
No, and you can't, you can apply non-discriminatory rules and regulations, treat them no different than any other rental property. And my understanding is that's exactly what's going to happen. But like any other rental property, we can't differentiate these houses because they are occupied by people who, under federal law, are considered disabled or handicapped. So we can apply, if you look in your letter from the state there, on first page number 3, they're very clear, and they say non-discriminatory zoning, building, fire, all that stuff. So the short answer is yes, it would be applied uniformly.
So the annual inspection, $30 a year, and if they don't do it, a $300 fine.
Again, I'm not.
That's the new bylaw that we've discussed.
Right.
And so it's gonna be applied against all rental properties of any kind.
I'm not going to speak to the building commissioner or board of health, but it's my understanding.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah, Paul?
I'm very happy to hear that the open meetings you have with the neighbors satisfactorily resolved a lot of the issues. I'm still troubled by the fact that we don't really know how many there are, or when they appear, how long they operate before we know anything about them. So they could all of a sudden appear, and how do you keep track of something like that if you don't really know? There's no registration,
Yeah,
and
you can't.
federal
There's
law
no
says you
distinction
have-
from any other housing rental in Falmouth. We don't track those either.
It could
and
be
we're
a lot
not
more
allowed
than
to.
10. We don't know.
Pardon me?
Could be a lot more than 10, we don't really know.
Sure.
I wanna go on record, I live 3 houses away from a sober house on Oak Street, and I was never notified of any meeting of any kind.
Well,
So there's,
Just make sure
It
everyone
was also
understands.
in the
Yeah,
paper.
but this
It
is-
was a public meeting advertised in the
Right.
paper and on the radio.
This wasn't a zoning permit, wasn't a building permit, wasn't a kind of regulatory venture. It was something that was sponsored by, I think, the legislator Vieira in the town, but there was no formal notice requirements in
Yeah.
that.
just a meeting.
It's just a public meeting.
That's all.
Other comments or questions? Just to give you an idea, on this, in 2007, the state invited alcohol and drug-free housing people that they had, that they knew of in the state. And they sent out invitations to 200 people, 200 individuals. 14% of those people came to this meeting. And handed out a survey, and only 2/3, 14% filled it out. So they concluded that people who operate sober houses, unless they're provided some kind of incentive, which to me is the key, you can't get them to participate in hardly anything. It's very difficult, but you have to approach them, at least attempt to approach them in some way. And when the citizens of this town have had issues with sober houses. I know one person who actually moved because he was in the proximity of a sober house, and he had no satisfaction in trying to reconcile the issues. The people in the proximity of one sober house hired an attorney and brought a petition article to town meeting because it was such a serious situation, and they wanted reconciliation of it. And you have to remember also, the research I've done, is this type of concern is not only about the abutters to these homes, but it's to the residents of these homes, and so whether or not they're being taken advantage of by the people who run and own those places. So it's not an easy situation, and you're not targeting just a certain portion of the population. So I would just like to continue working with Karen and Brian and the building commissioner maybe, and see whether or not there are any incentives that we can advertise to these owners to make sure that we as a planning board have done as much as we can to accommodate the people who live in the proximity of these places, and also the people who are residents of these places. So that's what I'm asking. Whether or not you would agree that I go ahead and I'm not going to do anything without coming back to this board, obviously. But somebody, it's like a one-man subcommittee here. I know all of you are participating in other issues that the planning board is involved in. I thought I would just follow through on this one, because I've worked on it before with Karen.
Mr. Chair, I will make a motion that if Ralph wants to spin his wheels on this issue, he has our consent, okay, to work with Brian as well.
Okay, and that's the language you want in the minutes?
No,
Is
if
that
Ralph
the
wants to go forward on this issue, he can do so with our consent and work with Brian.
Okay, do I have a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, discussion.
I'd
Paul?
like to see some kind of target date to come back with something, because this occurred, 10 months or so ago.
All right.
It'd be nice to have some kind of 3 months, 6 months, or whatever you think is appropriate, but rather than just let it slide, it would make some sense to try to target a date that's reasonable and convenient.
Right.
I accept that as an amendment, progress report in 3 months,
Or sooner.
6.
or sooner, whatever.
Yeah. That's an amendment to your motion?
Right.
Do you have a second to the amendment?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
I have further discussion.
Okay, to the amendment?
No,
Okay, all right. So voting on the amendment about a target date. Any discussion on the amendment? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained. Okay, now, the main motion is, Pat.
I'm just having a great deal of difficulty in seeing this as a planning board issue. I have absolutely no problem with you pursuing it individually to encourage, if it once again becomes something that the planning board can do something about, but everything I'm hearing tonight, there's nothing we can do as a planning board. And so I'm hard pressed to say, other than go ahead and pursue it and see what you can do to offer incentives, but the planning board doesn't offer incentives. The planning board does zoning. And we've been told that you cannot do restrictive zoning of any nature for sober houses. So I'm really hard pressed to consider it a planning board issue.
That's a good point.
That was part of my motion, that was a planning board issue. You can sound things off with Brian just like anybody, but on anything.
The question is, should we support it as a planning board? He can do that on his own.
I'm not saying we're supporting it, I'm just saying, if he wants our consent to do it, That was my motion. We consent to his doing that as our chairman.
Doug?
I think it still is appropriate to investigate more, and more knowledge is better. At least when people come to us with concerns, we'll have more knowledge and information to share. It's probably as much as we can do.
Jim?
Just the same point I brought up before, I just want to make sure that if we are, as a town, going to be instituting an annual inspection of every house that's rented, that these sober houses are included in the exact same inspection and the exact same penalties if, if they don't register properly.
Well, at some point.
Same as every other home, equally.
At some
I
point,
can't imagine that they would be done any differently, because that would be then reverse discrimination.
Right, but if the end of the year they haven't gone through, registered and gone through an inspection, that'd be entitled, that they end up with a $300 fine, just the same thing as anyone else who rents their house out and doesn't go through the proper rules.
Right, but the planning board will not be involved in passing that regulation, that.
Didn't we discuss this, though? Wasn't this something that came up?
You said earlier that it was ours, it's not ours.
I must
It's not
have-
our-
maybe I
it's
heard
not
it
our
at another
purview.
meeting.
No, it's not your purview. There's very limited things you can do as a board. There's a federal preemption under federal law, there's a state preemption under state law. But Ralph would like to just take a few moments and just discuss with me what perhaps he might be doing as Falmouth Planning Board Chairman to offer at least something out there for a very loose association of these residences in terms of incentives. Put it out there. It's really not a planning board issue, obviously, but I have no problem speaking with Ralph, and we can move on.
All right, so there's any more discussion on the motion? Okay, I will not vote on this. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
And I, two opposed, 1, 2, 3, 4 in favor, and I will abstain, so
I
it
abstain
passes.
as well. I didn't vote.
All those in favor, just please raise your hand. 3 opposed. 2, and I abstain.
So did I.
2 abstain. So it passes 3 to 2. Okay. All right, I thank you for that, and I will, thanks, Karen, for coming, and I appreciate the planning board's time in discussing this, and I hope it'll be fruitful. The next item on the agenda are road betterments.
Okay, that's a misnomer. I'm sorry, that should be road taking non-betterment.
Okay.
That's my error.
Road takings, non-betterments, okay? There are no betterments involved in this road taking. So, Mr. Curry is going to speak to this.
The Board of Selectmen have written a letter to the planning board. As you know, under the state law, the board gives the Board of Selectmen a recommendation with regards to private ways that are petitioned to be accepted as town-accepted ways. It's just not a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen for them to make a motion at town meeting whether or not to accept these roads. The 3 roads involved here are Cash's Trail, and that's a road up on the Mashpee town line, just past Martin Road, right on the Mashpee town line. And some roads in the old St. Gregory, the Sandcastle and Castle. You'll have those plans in front of you. These are subdivision control roads. They're built to subdivision control standards. All bonds have been released. And you may recall one of the things we look at in road takings would be whether there's a common convenience and necessity, and whether or not they are subdivision control roads built to town standards, and these are. recommendation to the board would be simply to pass along your recommendation to the board of selectmen to accept them as such.
Okay, I'm familiar with why don't I read this letter, it's very brief. To Brian Curry from Diane Davidson, the office manager and in charge of overseeing licensing, dated January 15th of this year. During its meeting on Monday, January 7th, the Board of Selectmen voted its intent to lay out Sandcastle Drive, Castle Road, and Cassius Trail as public ways and to refer the plans to the planning board for its review in accordance with the practice of non-betterment road takings at no cost to the taxpayers. The Board of Selectmen requires the petitioners of these roads to pay for the cost of recording documents at the Registry of Deeds. Thank you. So, I asked Brian if any of these roads needed any repairs or any drainage or anything like that, and he assured me that there was nothing required of these roads, because if there were, then the town would be asking for a betterment, like they are asking on the road where I live. And it was approved, but only with a betterment. So, any discussion on this before I have a motion? Discussion on these roads? Yes, Rich?
I'm in general against taking roads that do not lead anywhere. Dead-end roads, subdivision roads that have no possible public benefit. That's just my general feeling on this. I don't have a strong feeling about these roads. It's just, why are these being taken as public roads if they are not connectors to anything? I don't know these particular roads, and I would ask Brian, are these connector roads? Can you get from
Can you see, Rich, they're right in front of us here.
Yeah, but I can't see, I see that the ends that the road ends at a certain height. Is that a dead end? Yeah, it looks like a dead end. National Road is a dead end.
No, I don't know what you're looking at there,
We're just a,
Doug, but that's not what we're talking about.
Castle Road? Yeah, that is the engineer drawings.
Oh, that's a blow up of, I see, I have a larger, do you have this,
No, I don't have
Okay,
that.
why don't you put that in front of Rich?
Okay, inasmuch as this now shows me that you can get from Davisville Road, you can do a circle in there. Okay, it's conceivable that somebody would want to use that as a detour to turn around, it's not strictly a dead end. So,
Right.
like I said, I don't feel that strongly about it, but,
I know the streets well.
Okay, other comments, other than Rich? None, then I need a motion that we, would,
You would like a recommendation. to the-
recommendation that the town take these roads without betterment.
So moved.
Second.
Have a second, okay? Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay, motion carries. That's yours, Brian. The next item on the agenda is Sandwich Road Athletic Fields proposing a basketball court construction. Believe Brian will speak to that.
The site plan is in front of you, but I had a request from the Recreation Committee just to ask the planning board is very generalized consideration whether or not such an idea is in your thinking. And I know Kennedy is here tonight to go to San I think they would like to address the board.
Okay, that's fine. Yes. Helen, yeah, okay,
Hi, I'm Helen Kennedy, the Recreation Director for the town of Falmouth. We did send you a letter, and I hope you all have a copy of it. And we're just asking for your consideration on possibly letting us construct a basketball court at some time. We're working on possibly getting the well, with your consideration, the parking lot paved, and we thought that it would be a great idea to put a basketball court in there. It's one of our goals to provide more public recreation for all age groups in the town of Falmouth.
I have a plot plan of the existing, and there's no,
On your last page, Ralph, you'll see that the plan that was approved.
okay,
What they're thinking is to pave the parking lot. Right now, it's not paved. And the recreation committee would like, at least the board is thinking with regards to also, as part of that exercise, installing a basketball court, I think on the easterly sideline of the paved parking area. They don't want to move forward if the planning board has any kind of prima facie objections. They'd like to at least have the guidance tonight so they can pursue permits and funding. Not to speak for the recreation committee, but I think that's about the gist of it.
We have received a donation from the gaming family to put towards the paving of the parking lot. At the same time, the Recreation Committee has been talking about increasing the recreation around town. If you remember, years and years ago, there was a basketball hoop on probably every side street. And they're no longer, allowed to be there, even though we might see one or two. So we've been looking at different places of where we can add that type of recreation. And this is, to me, a perfect location. If in fact we do, at some point, pave the parking lot, it would just be the same thing. We'd be paving an area to put up basketball courts there. Added recreation, keeping it all together. And so we would like your recommendation and approval under the guidelines. We need to come back to you if we decide to do anything different. So those were our thoughts.
yeah, Rich?
I'm not familiar with this, but what's there now?
Dirt. This is the new Falmouth Road field.
Okay, well, there's nothing there. Now, how recently has that been done?
The fields
The
have been.
fields are open.
Okay.
There's a baseball. You need to take a ride down Sandwich
Yeah,
Road.
I've been out of the rec loop for, about
Okay.
5 or 6 years.
The fields are up and running,
Okay.
but the parking lot is not, it's just dirt there. So it's not.
Rich, there's a Jewish congregation has a church there, and then there's there's another church, right?
University.
University, yeah, right, and then the fields are right there, right next to that,
Okay.
right on Sandwich Road, on the western side, okay?
Like I said, I never really paid any attention to it.
Very nice. Yeah, you should.
Other comments, Jim?
Any thoughts about lighting in the future?
We're always thinking, but we can't foresee it in the foreseeable future, but hopefully someday.
Right.
Any question about AstroTurf out there?
No. No, we just opened them last year. We want to, get them up and running, get everything looking nice.
We'd like to finish the project.
Right.
I mean, we have two beautiful fields and parking lot is not good.
I asked Brian if he would check into what the CPC had as far as conditions when they gave the town the money to develop these. And were there any conditions that would preempt this?
I haven't looked at the CPA's conditions because this is really a standalone thing for the planning board right now. I don't have that information on, but right now the rec committee is looking at this at the permit level, site plan review level. So they were here to get your thinking with regards to whether or not this activity is something you would consider as part of the plan.
Well, I guess my point is, if there were conditions placed on the fields and the whole development that would preclude this, then why would we even consider it? So I guess
You mean in a
that's my
memorandum of
point.
understanding?
Let me
Where would that be
Let me
written?
finish my comments, please. I'm sorry. Just like it was a conservation commission issues, or other regulatory boards, they have to satisfy those boards. And if there's a condition of another board with regards to some financial commitments, they would have to satisfy those. But I at least want the planning board to consider this on its own merits as part of a site plan review and a zoning bylaw, without muddling the waters about what other boards might or may not be doing.
Okay, then I guess, all right, Pat?
I would be wholeheartedly in favor of this. The more we can do to supply our youth with wholesome activities and local and easily accessible, the better we are as a town.
Jim?
I'm in total agreement with Pat. All I would like to do is, because nothing's shown on this plan, when you actually figure out exactly where you're gonna put it, you'll be modifying our approved plan, you've got a chance to look at that time, but I'm in favor of it.
Yeah? Paul?
I had a question. I'm looking at this plan here, LM1. I see a future baseball, future lacrosse,
not here.
future playground, but I don't see where
not
you're
there.
talking
It's
about
not
the
there.
basketball. Where is that located on this drawing?
It's not on it. That's the whole point.
It's just
Not on.
green.
Conceptual.
Well, I heard the east side of the parking lot? Okay, so-
I'd be over here.
Be over here.
Well,
East is north is here.
north is here.
North,
So
east
so
is-
are you talking about between Sandwich Road and the parking lot, that space there? For
Well, it'd be
that-
closer to the baseball field.
So we don't know yet.
Right.
We gotta wait till they put it on the
Okay.
plan.
That side.
Somewhere.
They gotta put it on the plan.
Yeah.
Okay, so at the other end of the parking
Yeah.
lot, okay.
Yeah.
Probably the southeast corner by the playground, right?
No, the
It'd actually be
opposite
the
side.
northeast corner, so,
They'll come back with a plan.
yeah.
Right, we just wanna know if we can move forward and do all that.
Right, is there a requirement for a certain number of parking spaces when you put it together, Ellen? And so would you be reducing the number of parking spaces by doing this?
No, I believe that this, and it's not etched in stone, where we want to put it, it's beyond the parking area. The
Okay.
town still owns some land beyond the parking area.
Okay. Yeah, Doug?
Just have a question. If they wanted to use impervious surface, could we not prove that? So even if there was any issues, you could always have an impervious surface basketball court.
Kirby's.
Pervious.
Oh, pervious, right, excuse me.
Tough word.
Right now it's pervious. The whole parking lot.
Yeah, it's never early.
That's a nice way to put it.
And you want to pave it? Or are you thinking about paving?
It would be easier to pave it as long as it's no issue with lot coverage.
Yeah, right. Other questions or comments? Wow, well then, it looks to me like we don't have any objections.
Thank you.
Very good.
Just the devil's in the details and come back to it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks for
very much.
coming. I saw the gates up.
Yep, I'm glad you noticed that. Took us a while to get it there. but we-
That's all right. Okay, that's the last item for discussion. Releases, I take it there aren't any, Brian?
But, you wanted to talk about using the local comprehensive plan on the staff report?
Oh, excuse me, how did I miss that? Excuse me, Pat and Jim and Bob, my apologies. The LCP staff report. Staff report.
You wanted,
That's you?
last meeting, you had asked us to be on the agenda because you wanted to have a discussion with regards to how we can use the local comprehensive plan as part of our staff report. And we had a brief discussion in that, my understanding of the local comprehensive plan, it's not a regulatory document, and we wanted to have it on for discussion with the board to see how we would proceed in that direction. I had some thoughts about it. It's very, but you wanted it on the agenda tonight, my understanding, or else we
Yeah.
would work at a discussion about where to go with that.
Oh, okay.
Right.
All right, well, those are my thoughts. In the past, it's been obvious to me that there's very little reference to the local comprehensive plan when things happen in this town. And I know that because of my representation on the Community Preservation Committee, we insist when they apply to us that they reference that so that it's consistent, so that proposals that come before us that are recommended to town meeting for funding, that the local comprehensive plan has been taken into consideration. So, my thinking is that I think it should go beyond the Community Preservation Committee, and that if planning, by definition, if we're a planning board, why wouldn't we want people that come before us to refer to the local comprehensive plan? Jim?
I'm wholeheartedly in favor of it. I don't know if it's possible. It'd be quite helpful, though, that every time something brought up, if they could at least reference the element that it's under, how it fits with the goals, and if it's part of a specific action plan that's on the table for those few years. I mean, that three-pronged approach, saying what element under the plan that this is consistent with, that it meets or is at least somewhat in line with the goals of that element, and if possibly specifically satisfies a current action plan that the town has approved for that element and goal. Say that right, Pat?
Pat?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but the local comprehensive plan has no legal clout to it. It's a guidance document. And because it's only a guidance document, I think it's more apt to be used by the planning board when we create zoning or overlay districts or whatever to encourage the goals of the comprehensive plan. A lot of the things that we get brought before us as a planning board, I'd be hard pressed to say you could actually say that, I mean, a site plan review, come on. How can we actually apply the local comprehensive plan to a site plan review?
I agree with Pat, Chair, and I would say this, that it opens up a can of worms. I know if I'm a lawyer and I come in with a plan that's just a little bit sketchy, and you start asking me about the local comprehensive plan, and even though we might have good reasons to deny the plan under the bylaw, and even if we say that those are the reasons, if we demanded that they show us how it complies with the local comprehensive plan, over which we have no enforcement powers, they're going to go right to Superior Court and get our decision thrown out. Because they're going to say, even though we didn't say it, they're going to say we overstepped our bounds there. Whereas if we don't say anything about it, and we just decided on the basis of the plan itself, well then, I'm going to give an example, and we have a multiple use coming up on a piece of property, and there are issues as to the access and things like that on a site plan, and we have those kind of concerns. But then somebody says, well, this isn't really consistent with the goal for this, and then we turn the plan down, even though we have good reasons for access and frontage and things like that for turning it down. Under site plan review, they're going to say that the reason we did it was because we talked about that. So I don't think that's a good idea. I think, as Pat says, that's what we use that when we go to town meeting to say, well, we need this bylaw so that we can enforce those standards. But then once it's in the bylaw, we can do it.
Mr. Chairman? Just a second, Bob?
I think it's a tool for this board as well as other boards to use. I don't think we should apply it to anybody that comes before us, but it's something that can guide us in our decision-making as well as any other board that might reference this. Having worked on it and spent some time on it, I'd like to see it used and not become a bookend to holding up something on a shelf. So to me, it's a tool, and I think if we can use it that way and amongst ourselves reference it.
Sorry about that.
That's my time up.
No, but Jim's is.
So that's my comment on that, it's a tool for us and other boards to use.
Jim, you said.
Yeah, my suggestion that this is something I'd want the staff to tell us about on it when we're looking at something. I don't necessarily that the applicant is responsible or something we judge, but I think every time, I just think every time we look at something, we should reflect to see how it fits the local comprehensive plan. And whether it fits into the action items or not, it doesn't mean we have to use it as approval or not, but it should be something that we as a board take a look at everything we do.
Not every time. There may be
Okay.
Goals might be better met by clustering the units. So that's what I mean by that. And yes, we've done that.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Rich?
that's what I was getting at when I said that it would be applied to Jim, and not every case. There may be some cases, as in subdivision control, where we have, overall planning concerns for subdivisions, and even there with the cluster, we can't force them to cluster, but we can, that's one area where the carrot might work a little bit, we don't have a stick there. But then when we say, when we're getting into site plans, we're getting very sketchy, when we're getting into perimeter plans and asking what the purpose of that is for, then we're getting very sketchy. And we're just inviting lawsuits that we'll lose. So I think, in appropriate cases, we do refer to the local comprehensive plan. And we always should be doing that when we talk about bylaw changes. When we talk about changes in bylaws, we should always talk about the local comprehensive plan, get town meeting to adopt a bylaw that will allow us to apply those standards within the context of the bylaw. Then it has some teeth and we're legitimate.
Yeah, Jim?
I'm somewhat confused. Who determines when it's appropriate or not?
The context.
Well, I don't know, but who determines that context? Richard, you said, if you think it's appropriate, it's good to have, and if you don't think it's appropriate, it's not good to have.
There are
Does that mean it's your decision?
No, it is the decision of the law. There are contexts where we have the latitude to do that, such as Pat gave an excellent example, the cluster bylaw, where we can at least inquire of the applicant, would you like to move in this way, because we have a bylaw that allows them to do that. We can't even there enforce it, but we do have a right to consider local, comprehensive planning in that context. We don't have the right to consider that when we're talking about the uses on a site plan, for example. We don't have a right to consider that. And if we try to consider that, we are opening ourselves up to a lawsuit. So context determines that. It's not arbitrary, it's not capricious, it is determined by context.
I'm in agreement. And then I would think as long as the staff says it's by context and they bring it up and we discuss it, I'd be very happy that it's be discussed. And that's the point I was making, and I wouldn't want to apply it to things that has no context to, but I think it's appropriate for the staff where the context is agreeing with what you say, Richard, is brought up and we review it. I think it's a good idea. We've been working for months and months and days to try to bring this plan forward, and if it's just going to sit on the shelf because no one ever looks at it, we're really wasting a lot of time.
Mr. Chair, when there is some basis in the bylaw to make those considerations, Brian will call that basis to our attention, and then we can consider those things. When there's no basis in the bylaw to raise those issues, we should raise them.
Well, Jim brought up, just mentioned my overriding reason is that if the local comprehensive plan doesn't have any more importance than just sitting on a shelf, then why are we spending so much time, staff time, planning board time, on something that has no effect at all on if it's a local comprehensive plan? As I understand it, the county has a plan, and I can't recall, can you maybe help me what that's called, Brian?
Yeah, we'll take a little step back. The county plan, the regional policy plan, is actually a county ordinance. And it's voted by the Assembly of Delegates,
Right.
which is the county assembly, which is the equivalent of our town meeting or legislature. It's a
Right.
law. It's actually a law.
Mhm.
The local comprehensive plan is not a law. It's voted at town meeting as the goals and policies, the aspirations. It's a very important document. It can be used for committees who make funding determinations, such as the conservation or the
Community
the Preservation Committee. There are instances where we go back to town meeting and we say, okay, we would like to be able to at least reference some of the things in the comprehensive plan as a regulatory document. Town meeting is insistent that whenever that occurs, they give up you permission. You simply can't do it as an administrative fiat. If you want, I think the open space cluster subdivision is a great example, because one of the considerations, the 7 considerations you have there, one is is it consistent with the open space element? So if in fact someone comes in and wants to have a housing development, and you want a density bonus, that's a good example. If the housing that's coming in, and town meeting votes it into your special permit criteria, whatever criteria is in your bylaw, you can have, is it consistent with the affordable housing element of a local comprehensive plan? But you can't introduce it on your own motion. Town meeting has to introduce it as part of a regulatory document, whether it's the Conservation Commission stuff, or your stuff, or someone's stuff. Town meeting makes that decision for you. You don't make that decision.
That's fine.
So the discussion here is, I'm sorry, the discussion here is, what would you like to bring back to town meeting that's involved in a local comprehensive plan that you might want to use in a regulatory environment?
Right, I'm gonna cite an example. We proposed and had town meeting pass a zoning article that created light industrial C. We did that about either 6 months or a year ago. I don't recall in any of our discussions when we proposed that, where we referenced the local comprehensive plan. Not one time. We thought it was good. I don't think we used the local comprehensive plan to justify in our own minds that that was a good thing to do from an economic development point of view. So what I'm saying is that I'm not above saying, let's go to the town meeting and say, we want the local comprehensive plan included in some of our bylaws, in 240, in certain places where it would be appropriate. I think that might make sense.
Just as an aside, as part of your presentation for light industrial C, I had a slide. It was consistent with the goals and policies of the local comprehensive plan and the Board of Selectmen strategic. It's something we always look at before we let you go too far down the road.
Okay, I remember the strategic plan, but I don't remember the local comprehensive plan. But I don't remember us discussing.
As a board, it wasn't greatly discussed. But like I said, if you want to bring something specific in the local comprehensive plan back into the regulatory world, town meeting has always said, it's okay, but you bring it back to us first, we say okay, and we'll
That's fine with me. I don't have an objection to that. I think that's what we should be considering. Yes, yeah, Jim?
If we could just, what I'm looking for is not make it regulatory or anything. but we have a list of questions that our staff answers for us on every article that comes up. It's a checklist. I'm just asking, somewhere down the bottom, for informational purposes, is it consistent with our local comprehensive plan?
Like an article for town meeting.
No, but on our minute notes, every time you bring something,
Staff report.
Staff
that you-
report.
With the boxes that you check off.
Right, I wouldn't put that in there because it's not germane to your decision making.
Right.
Right now, you can look at setbacks, you can look at lot coverage, you can look at parking. Right now, the bylaw doesn't authorize you to look at, is it consistent with local comprehension? That's why it's
Chair?
not there.
Yeah.
well, let me finish this. So you're saying that, are there any times that it should be appropriate?
Yes, when you looked at the air park
Okay.
subdivision, one of the things we had you look at was the seven criteria. And one was, is it consistent with the open space element? of the-
Then all I'm saying is wherever it's appropriate, that the staff should bring it to our attention. I'm not trying to make it a ruling or something's gonna get thrown out of court or anything like that. I just want wherever possible that it's something that's brought up and it's on a checklist where appropriate.
Got it.
Period.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Rich?
2 comments. One, Jim's first comment was every time, and that's what I jumped on. And where appropriate, I agree with him. Second comment, where there is a situation where, let's say we're presented with a subdivision plan and it's actually coming in right within the letter of the law, but there is some concern about the local comprehensive plan, it would be entirely appropriate, not during that proceeding where we have to allow that, but for Brian to, the very next meeting, call our attention to the concern. I mean, I can't think of one right off the top of my head, but if there is some little glitch that somebody's able to, weasel something they shouldn't get out of our bylaw that is inconsistent with the local comprehensive plan, that should be called to our attention after the fact, after we have allowed it, because we had to. So there's no legal issue, but then that goes right on our agenda for tweaking the bylaw the next town meeting. That's a very important role of the local comprehensive plan, and also the fact that when we are pushing for bylaw changes, we can refer to the local comprehensive plan to town meeting to say, this is why we're doing it. We're not just doing it arbitrarily or just for something to do, but we're doing it to advance the local comprehensive plan. If we don't have that kind of a broad planning document, then everything we do is going to be opposed by somebody and it's going to be considered to be arbitrary. So I think it's a very important document to have, but it should be used appropriately. I'm just going to give you one little example. The preamble to the Constitution has absolutely no binding effect, but it states ideals. And so when the articles are adopted and the amendments are adopted, they are adopted in conformity with those ideals. But by itself, it has no binding effect.
Okay, the local comprehensive plan is developed by local comprehensive planning committee, which is the planning board now, and is brought to town meeting for approval. Am I correct on that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, okay. So, you already have taken the two steps. You've developed the plan, and you brought it to town meeting for their approval. Now, to take it to the third step and incorporate it into our bylaw in certain appropriate places doesn't seem like a big deal to me, and it seems appropriate.
Where are those appropriate places?
That's for us to decide.
If we're talking about broad, general goals,
The local
I'm not sure that
comprehensive
those are
plan
going to
isn't
be-
that broad, it's quite specific, actually.
if we're talking about broad, general goals, well, let's get back to site plan review.
No, no, Rich, I don't want to get back to site plan review.
Well,
I want to stay on the local comprehensive plan, which is
No,
what we're
I'm talking
talking
about-
about.
we're going
You're
to-
talking about something specific. I'm talking about general application of the local comprehensive plan, not just site plan review.
Well, but if you're talking about general application of it, you're talking about it in context like site plan review, and we have no business doing it.
Okay, that's loud and clear, okay? I understand that, you've said that 5 times tonight.
Subdivision control.
I want to
How do we
hear some
apply
other
the local-
discussion about the local comprehensive plan.
how do we-
Rich, I'm not going to recognize you, I'm recognizing Pat.
Okay, I think we need to back out of this discussion a little bit here, because I think it's gotten beyond and off topic of what the local comprehensive plan is that we are developing. All right. We are trying to make it a bit different from what it was so that it will live longer. We are trying to have each element have one goal that sets the tone. Maybe 3 priorities in each element. These are more general, and they will keep on living. We can't incorporate any of those into bylaws or specific behaviors of the town. Then we go to action items. Those can't either. The action items might be, oh, let's hire an expert here to figure this one out. Or let's encourage disposal of the CFLs in handy places instead of having them have them be dumped in the trash so you've got mercury going into the trash. Those are the action items. They're more things that you do, not to be incorporated in any bylaw. So they provide guidance. And the way the current comprehensive plan is, it is extremely unevenly written. You've probably heard me beat this drum many times before. Some topics are maybe 8 pages in length, some are 30. Some have all kinds of statistics in them, very difficult to read. We are trying to make this a much easier to use document. Now, along with that, if you are concerned that it will become a bookend, and it has in many instances, but what also has surprised me is that probably half of the action items in the one that's, well, 7 years old now, have actually been accomplished by well-meaning citizens and town groups. But to try to keep this from becoming a bookend, we would like to see a standing committee that gives a report every year, that meets with the responsible parties for seeing that these action items are accomplished. We're giving a timeline for the items to be accomplished. And that group will have the capacity to amend the action items based upon experience, to delete because they've been accomplished, or to add as the town needs change. So it is really the action items that are the vibrant parts of the local comprehensive plan, that the living part of it, if you will. And the way to keep that from becoming a bookend, we believe, is to have a standing committee. I'm not in favor of committees just for the sake of committees. This committee is going to have to be one that is active, that meets, and that has a sense of responsibility for the future of the town. But as far as translating these into bylaws or the Conservation Commission will, we can't make that happen with the comprehensive plan. There is no force of law. But if we have the force of, the word escapes me.
Persuade.
Thank you, persuasion. That is a good thing to use. It's for the benefit of the town. We put this in as an action item. We really encourage you, and if you find that it is not an appropriate action item, tell us, we'll amend it, because we do not have to go back to town meeting for the action items. So that's the comprehensive plan, and that's essentially what we've been talking about here, without making it part of a bylaw, is okay. If the comprehensive plan with what we are doing or proposing to do supports what is before us, both as our proposing a bylaw or a proponent coming in for a particular plan, yeah, it's fair to reference it. This enhances the future of the town. This is the direction that the comprehensive plan could see, and that's why it's written that way. So yeah, we've got the comprehensive plan on our side, but we can't use it like a hammer and say you will because it's in the comprehensive plan. There's no legality behind it. Anyway, I've said my piece now.
Mr. Chair, a constructive suggestion.
Excuse me, Rich, I haven't recognized you yet. Did you have something to say?
I think there's a solution to it. And I wasn't trying to get the staff to tell us how it fits. But if the staff at every time, at everything that's brought up, could simply say, there's nothing in, this has no, the local comprehensive plan has no applicability on this issue. And we're done, we don't bring it up. Or if it does, they brought it to our attention, just so it's considered. For instance, Rich is concerned how we're gonna apply local comprehensive plan issues to site plans. I mean, they just say, look, it's a site plan, local comprehensive has nothing to do with it, and we move on. But if something that it does, we should at least consider it at that point, and that's something our staff could keep us advised to.
Rich?
That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. What Jim just said, I have no argument with.
That's what I should have said.
What
First.
you suggested, Mr. Chair, about going to town meeting, I suggest before we do anything of that nature, I hate to burden Mr. Curry with.
Good, don't do it.
But I would suggest, before we did anything like that, we should ask Mr. Curry to give us a report, and for our purview, go through each of our tasks, what leeway we would have under state law to incorporate what portions of the LCP into subdivision control, what leeway we would have under state law to incorporate portions of the LCP into A&R, what portion we would have, what leeway we would have under state law to incorporate portions of the LCP into perimeter plans, into site plans, and have him tell us what leeway at all there might be. And to the extent there might be some leeway under state law to enact an appropriate bylaw that would pass constitutional muster and pass legal muster, well then, fine. We can go to town meeting with that, and we've done our homework.
Right.
Okay?
Absolutely.
But that requires some homework first.
Absolutely.
And I'm not confident there's gonna be any. And we could also look at Concom regulations, building department regulations, and say, well, what leeway is there under state law to adopt bylaws that those groups apply by the same token? If there is some leeway, fine, I got no argument against doing that. But I'm just very concerned that we get into areas where we got no business getting into. And that therefore we get the town in trouble. We get the town is already in enough trouble.
What over here?
That's just understood as far as I'm concerned. Yes.
To me, that seems like a lot of work for the staff. And we discussed last week the possibility of going before a town meeting and asking for funds to have the code book, zoning bylaws rewritten, and all the fluff and everything else taken out of it, or inconsistencies and things like that. And that might be a suggestion for whoever we hire, if we do get that chance, to have them take the local comprehensive plan and do exactly what Richard suggested.
That's a possibility. Okay, any other comments or questions on that? We discussed it. Okay. All right, now I'm down to releases. I don't think there are any, Brian. Committee reports. Any committee reports?
Pretty much had one.
No. New business, things you want brought up in the future. Yes, Jim?
Not in a rush, but when the staff thinks appropriate, I would like to talk about transportation in the future.
Okay. You brought that up prior.
Right, but when it's appropriate, yeah.
Okay. Maybe we could get some feedback from where, if the commission is functioning at all now, and whether or not it could be, your proposal was to make it a subcommittee of the planning board, possibly.
It's discussion. I shouldn't make a
Okay.
proposal
Okay.
without having discussion.
Okay.
On the agenda.
So we could, why don't
On
we
the
just,
agenda, right, I want to bring it up in
all right,
discussion.
so let's just say, all right, review it and see
When it's on
whether-
the agenda.
Okay, all right. Anybody else for something in the future? Correspondence, I read the only letter that was addressed to, I think, Brian, by Ms.
Correspondence.
And so there's no correspondence. Okay, then I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?